Hello and welcome to the 7th episode of our Lange Söhne series. In the previous episode, we examined the changing designs of Lange Söhne along with the new management and the pivoting approach towards special editions. Moreover, we had an in-depth look at the ground complication and the Zeitwerk Minute-Repeater. Finally, we touched upon the arrival of Wilhelm Schmidt and his philosophy briefly. In this episode of Lange Söhne through the 2010s, we are going to take a look at the developing portfolio of complications, the Lange One update, expanding boutique network and boutique editions, and finally, noteworthy special editions, which we have definitely some bangers. So let's go into it. Starting from 2011, Lange Söhne started to offer a highly complicated piece every year. Some were just on-top modules, but some were truly novel takes on various complications. A brand offers a brilliant piece once in a while, but doing it year after year with the same push and almost always with a surprise, it is a different league, and without a doubt, such focus is one of the fundamental reasons for the brand's well-earned reputation today. Now, please join me over a brief look of some of the noteworthy pieces. A mechanical watch, especially if it is complicated, can take up to several years to develop, and that is if it ever comes out. Because there are some that simply cannot be done. One of those impossible ones for Lange was the Lange Tourbillon Perpetual calendar. As I was told by long-term employees of the brand, according to Blumlein, it was impossible to implement a perpetual calendar on a Lange One canvas. Well, history shows that this universal genius was rarely wrong, and this is one of those very few. Lange Söhne introduced the Lange One Perpetual Calendar Tourbillon in 2012. The watch came as a limited edition of 100 pieces in the noble platinum metal at an utterly variable 41.9mm in diameter and 12.2mm in thickness. If you would remember, one of Blumlein's guiding principles was to offer a real benefit to the user. Lange One Perpetual Calendar does this with its corrector pusher to advance all indications at once, which was first introduced with the Langematic Perpetual in 2001. Just a brilliant touch, to be honest. The specialty of this piece, though, is also its mechanism. Most perpetual calendars work on a module. However, implementing a module while preserving the identity and proportions of the Lange One was simply not possible. Instead, the whole movement is an integrated perpetual calendar mechanism. It was the only way to make this work, say the developers. And it did work. An integrated perpetual calendar with jumping indications, with one-of-a-kind display arrangement. As they did with other stable complications and mechanisms such as chronographs and tourbillon, Lange took on reinventing the calendar and successfully delivered. The movement on the back, beneath the solid gold rotor, German silver plates, gears, and a faceted diamond end stone hides a brilliantly crafted tourbillon cage. This is Lange Söhne's discreet approach, as no other than absolute like-minded watch guys would know how much of a grail you're wearing. Speaking of calendars, we saw the introduction of the 1815 Rattrapante Perpetual calendar in 2013 next to the monumental ground complication, a miniaturized version per se, and adorned with delightful details of the 1815 collection. The 1815 Rattrapante Perpetual is, I believe, the most pocket watch reminiscing piece of the brand. Albeit, it lacks the usual Lange chronograph charm from the back due to its flat levers and modular construction. It has been a tremendous bargain in the secondary market since its launch. 2014 brought us another monumental piece. I mean, both the size and the novelty of the complication. Richard Lange Terraluna, measuring at a 45.5mm in diameter and 16.6mm in thickness. This is just another watch that works better as a table clock or a pocket watch perhaps, though the artistry is immaculate, offering 14 days of power reserve through its double barrels with perpetual calendar on the front and an orbital moon phase indication on the back with 2160 laser etched stars over the sky. Not to mention that it is accurate to a day up to 1058 years on continuous operation, from the arrangement of its indications to its craft, and finally, ingenious technicality. This is a one-of-a-kind timepiece, really. Too bad that it wasn't meant to be worn by most of the mortals. 2015 brought us the Zeitwerk minute repeater, which went through extensively in the previous episode. So I'm just gonna fast forward to 2016, and this year, in my opinion, brought one of the most successful pieces of the brand's last decade. Datograph Perpetual Tourbillon in platinum. Also a clear indication of the brand's ever-evolving and getting better design language. When the Lange Perpetual module was utilized to create Datograph Perpetual in 2006, many had two similar complaints: the hanging subdials and the small moon phase. Well, it is a learning curve. In my opinion, with the Datograph Perpetual Tourbillon, Lange Söhne found the most optimal layout that could carry the signature big date. There are no more hanging subdials now. The dial appears completely symmetrical, well thought out and serious. The day and night and leap year indications are very well placed within subdials and displayed via a disc in order to avoid the further use and complexity of the hands. Power reserve indication placed around the tachymeter is just a genius touch. The moon phase disc at 6 o'clock, despite its limited size, has a charm that few others can match. Crafted from solid white gold for both references, it is accurate to 122.6 years in continuous operation. It gives that softening touch to this overly engineered beast, makes the Datograph Perpetual Tourbillon a bit more restrained perhaps. However, despite its attraction, its dial is not even the main show. Watch fans know that chronograph from Lange creates an irresistible temptation. However, this is just something else. The Datograph Perpetual Tourbillon offers a view from the back that, in my opinion, cannot be matched by any other Lange Söhne watch. I still remember my awe when I first laid my eyes upon the magnificence of the caliber L952.2. I had to pinch my arm to convince myself that this thing was real, and they actually managed to develop over the Datograph's caliber L951.1. Well, here it was. Lange Söhne introduced the caliber L951.1 in 1999, which you can see our in-depth walkthrough of the piece from the episode 3. Even today, it is regarded by many as the most beautiful chronograph movement ever made. Caliber L952.2 of the Datograph Perpetual Tourbillon is the continuation of such heritage. Anthony De Haas, the product development director of Lange Söhne since 2004, also points out that keeping the proportions and aesthetics of the caliber L951 was the paramount consideration while adapting the movement to carry a tourbillon. I say they have done an absolutely immaculate job. Not only aesthetically, but from the technical perspective too. With such a big tourbillon cage and instantaneous calendar indications, the energy balance in the movement was the big problem to solve. Imagine that you are the owner of this magnificent watch. 6 hours before midnight, the spring that powers the instantaneous perpetual calendar indications starts to charge up. In the meantime, you decide to just play with the chronograph, which creates another layer of friction, thus requires energy. And finally, we have the going train as usual. When all of these happen, there shouldn't be a loss in amplitude. Indeed, timekeeping is at paramount importance, and even when all three mechanisms are activated, Datograph Perpetual Tourbillon manages to keep fantastic time without a loss at amplitude. Oh, and let's not forget the Richard Lange jumping seconds introduced next to Datograph Perpetual Tourbillon. This is an avant-garde piece with a design based on Seyfried's pocket watch from 200 years ago and a mechanism based on an invention by Ferdinand Adolf Lange in 1867. This is a watch that reminds you once again, this manufacturer has an ability to combine the past with modernity only a very few can match. Venn diagram dial puts the jumping seconds right in the center, gives it the biggest stage. The little splash of red is apparent throughout the dial, breaking that monochrome outlook. The power reserve, again, smartly placed in the middle as a triangle, turns red to alarm you. On the back, we still have the glass watchmaking hallmarks with a modern take, as a result of its constant force escapement system. The main idea is to convert the 6 ticking into one impulse. The escape wheel carries a 5-pointed star on top, which is in contact with the flirt. After each second, the star frees the flirt, which in return transfers the energy to the second gear train, forwarding the hand by 1 step at a time. The blue spring powers the balance wheel again in 1-second intervals, hence the constant force. On top of this, Richard Lange jumping seconds also houses a zero reset mechanism. 2017 brought us another cocktail of complications, so to speak. Perhaps not as much as the grand complication, but a tour de force still. The Tourbograph Perpetual, limited to 50 pieces in platinum, measuring at a 43 mm in diameter and 16.6 mm in thickness. This was, again, far from being a wristwatch, but a marvelous object nonetheless. Module on top with the tourbillon buried deep, held by masterfully black polished curved bridges. Housing more than 1,100 parts with its individual fusee and chain parts. Tourbograph Perpetual is not as attractive from the back, again, due to its flatter levers compared to double split or Datograph, and you cannot even see the chain. Well, who cares though? An owner of this piece feels it while wanding, doesn't even have to see it. Made for a connoisseur who will just take this watch once in a while and enjoy caressing. In 2018, however, we have witnessed the birth of ultimate chronograph in Lange's repertoire, the triple split. You would know the famous motivational quote saying, "The only competition that matters is the one that takes place within yourself." Apparently, Lange Söhne took this extremely seriously. They upped the ante where they were the only players in the game, just to stay true to their identity, to never stand still. This persistence brought the most complicated chronograph ever made. The Lange triple split is paired with a white gold case and it has a limitation of 100, measuring at an assertive and hockey puck-ish 43.2 mm in diameter and 15.6 mm in thickness. Triple split indeed reminds us that it is a continuation of the bicep curl-worthy double split in platinum. However, simply due to its metal, this one wears much better than its hefty ancestor. The sheer depth of the movement matches the mind-blowing complexity of the caliber L13 2.1. It comprises of 556 stunningly finished pieces, layer over layer. One just wishes to shrink and wander within this metropole behind the sapphire glass, which Lange Söhne's official footage did exactly that. The triple split is a double Rattrapante mechanism that is improved upon the existing L001.1 of the double split. Now, if you know about double split's groundbreaking improvement over Datograph in 2004, initially you might have a hard time understanding the importance of the caliber L13 2.1. Despite the fact that the triple split houses an additional indication, which is the hours, thus the gear train for it, it offers 17 hours of more power reserve than the predecessor. The caliber L13 2.1 also measures just 0.3 mm thicker than its predecessor. In other words, it is much more efficient and compact. This alone means so much because it shows me that Lange Söhne indeed stays true to their identity and keeps improving on its own. This deserves an applause. Looking at these highlight pieces, we see a couple of common points. Apart from the Tourbograph Perpetual, they all bring something different to the table. Be it the mechanics or the display, there's a differentiation, character, and focus. On the high-end range, Lange is laser focused on doing things their way without getting boring or repetitive. You just know that year after year, Lange is going to bring something good. You can trust them that they will. This creativity, push for innovation in watchmaking, is something rare. Such approach just deserves respect, which is the reason why the brand had almost religious collectors since its launch. Of course, the brand wasn't only busy with launching one heavy hitter after another. As mentioned in the previous episode, Wilhelm Schmidt's arrival brought an overall transformation and focus to the brand. We see a process of modernization in design language without diluting the identity. Lange 1 is surely the best example. Since its inception in 1994, the Lange 1 was almost never touched apart from some very subtle changes. I mean, how can you? The watch was meant to be just perfect. And despite stupendous complications and heavy pieces from Lange, if there is a face of the brand, it is the Lange 1. After a bit more than 20 years, however, it was just time. In 2015, Lange Söhne overhauled the collection with small tweaks on the dial and blessed with a new movement. The bezel is slightly narrower, leaving more space to the dial. The inscriptions are slightly thinner and more defined, more elegant. Such tweaks put more emphasis on the design, allowing it to breathe more freely. And apart from these, the brand hasn't touched anything on the front. This is how one updates an icon. The big difference was on the back. After 20 years, Lange Söhne graced a new movement with in-house balance spring and wheel to the Lange 1. Just like its front side, compared to the previous edition, the new movement is much more subtle, plain, and dare I say, minimalistic. Apart from the cosmetic changes, the new Lange 1s are endowed with instantaneous date change and 0 stop seconds, which means when the power reserve is depleted, the second hand is always going to stop at 0. Lange Söhne also launched a Lange 1 set of 20 pieces, each with guilloche dials as a goodbye edition, including the now famous Lange 1 in honey gold with cream and textured dial. Apart from the watches, within this period, Lange Söhne welcomed its new manufacture building in 2015, a testimony to the brand's ever-growing popularity as well as its future. Moreover, the brand immensely expanded internationally by increasing the number of boutiques from 2 to 30s during the 2010s. Of course, the boutique editions followed. A brilliant example is the 1815 chronograph boutique edition. It marks the third generation of the family and the return of the pulsometer, as well as the multi-layer structure that I just enjoy so much. Possibly based on its success, Lange expanded the collection further in the coming years, most prominent versions being the white gold black dial 1815 chronograph. In my opinion, one of the best value watches crafted by the brand. On the special edition side, I must admit that 2010s are both the most exciting and boring period of the brand. They are exciting and irresistible at high price points, but mostly uninspiring at the entry-level segment. Two immediate examples are surely the Lumen and Handwerkskunst collections. As discussed in the 5th episode, the Lumen Collection was started off with my all-time favorite piece from the brand, the Phantom. Building on its success, Lange Söhne expanded the Lumen Collection with brilliant pieces. In 2012, we were greeted with the Grand Lange 1 Lumen. It was kind of a reminder of an old Grand Lange 1 edition, reference 115.029, though in a completely different league. The smoked sapphire reveals the numerals and the gears beneath, adding more dimension to the fun one can get from the watch. Observing the change of the numerals, though, its mechanism is truly enticing. Offered in a platinum case with a limitation number of 200 pieces, the model was priced at 59,000 euros at the time. 2 years later, Lange Söhne again upped the ante with a breathtaking piece over the same canvas. the Grand Lange 1 Lumen Moonface. For the first time, the Lumen concept was applied to something different than the time indications, the moonface. Do you remember the glowing ceiling decors when you were a child? The moon, the stars, the planet? Well, this watch seems to be thought by someone with such memory, and it could only be this fitting with the centuries of watchmaking craft. As you might know, the moonface discs of Lange watches are made of solid gold. For Grand Lange 1 Moonface Lumen, it is made of sapphire glass, first coated and laser etched with 1164 stars to create such realistic depiction of the sky. As with the date discs beneath the dial, the moonface discs charge itself behind the glass to glow during the night. While everything glows green, the red of the power reserve indication just makes it better. The gleams of perlage beneath the smoked sapphire reveals the depth of the dial and the mechanism, as if you can just get lost in it. Brilliant, brilliant watch. The model was also limited to 200 pieces and priced at 69,000 euros at its time. Now, in 2018, the Lumen Collection got another member, and the biggest one so far. It is the now mighty and deservedly famous Datograph Lumen. To be honest, my first impression with the watch was not positive at all. I thought that even the Lumen Collection fell victim to the brand's unimaginative special edition rush. Thankfully, all my doubts and grunts were for none. After handling the piece a few weeks later of its launch, I just fell in love. Datograph Lumen is made of platinum and measures at 41mm in diameter and 13.4mm in thickness, retaining that signature case construction with notched lugs, three-step case with alternating finish, and of course, the delightful pushes. The reason for the additional 0.3mm thickness is due to the new glass date wheel, which shines above the luminous background. The mentioned background is held by a plate, hence the additional thickness. As with other Lumen pieces, the functional parts are generously lumed. When the lights go out, the tachymeter scale, the hours and minute hands, chronograph seconds hand, and the power reserve indication, and the sub-dials delivers brilliant glow. What's more enticing with this piece, however, it is also very much special without the lume. Beneath the smoked sapphire, while the edges are easily visible, towards the center it gets darker and darker, creating a delightful depth. The perlage gets narrower from outside the inside, emphasizing the depth more and more. The other collection that must be mentioned is, of course, the Handwerkskunst. Started with the Richard Lange Tourbillon Preliminary in 2011, this extremely limited collection was also rightfully expanded without spoiling its specialty at all. The first expansion arrived in 2012 with the Zeitwerk Handwerkskunst, which in my opinion is the best of the series. The contrast between such an avant-garde design and the traditionally engraved dial is just magnificent. From the raised logo to power reserve indication, the piece is just perfection in execution. However, the stunning decoration is not the only specialty of the Zeitwerk Handwerkskunst. On the back, it greets us with another traditional delight from the region, the glassed escapement, made of solid gold with curved pallets to reduce friction, a delightful touch that one can expect from Lange. The following editions of the collections are Lange 1 Tourbillon Perpetual Calendar, 1815 Tourbillon, the 1815 Rattrapante Perpetual Calendar, and the Cabaret Tourbillon, each offering the best of Lange Söhne respective to the design. For example, 1815 Tourbillon carries a tremblage simply because its plain appearance can very well handle such complex decoration. On the other hand, the 1815 Rattrapante Perpetual Calendar relies more on the enamel coloring techniques, as its dial is already a complex one. The 2010s showed us the brand's willingness and success to focus on the higher end of the market while putting out slight revision to the entry-level lines. The brand grew tremendously, pulling most of the distribution in-house by opening tens of new boutiques. However, the reality of the secondary market was growing bigger and bigger. Despite all the magnificent pieces that we see here, the market was weak for the brand, which was a common discussion in every forum for almost 2 decades. In the next and the final episode, we are going to examine the brand's fight with the secondary market, its pricing strategy, a watch that changed it all during coronavirus, and the future of the brand with a surprise guest. Thank you very much.